Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, with the first part of the season now done and dusted, I'm going to look back at the winners and losers of 2024 so far, which teams have overperformed in that time and which have been underperforming. I'm also going to look back at the Tour of Romandy, the opening stage of La Vuelta Femenina, the Tour of Turkey, and a UAE demonstration at the Vuelta a Asturias. This week in the world of racing, we learnt that pro wins can be like buses. You don't get one at all, and then three come along at once.
And it is Tobias Lund Andersen who wins the stage for DSM. It's going to be a sprint again by Tobias Lund Andersen. He gets another win. Is this another case of a lead-out, doing the lead-out for himself? It's exactly that. It's a third stage win for Tobias Lund Andersen.
That was Tobias Lund Andersen, who'd never won a pro race just 1 week ago. Well, he's now got 3 under his belt in what was a very successful Tour of Turkey for Team DSM. More on that later on. We also learnt that Demi Vollering is now a Nike-sponsored athlete. She announced that partnership on social media yesterday, although it remains to be seen whether we'll see any of the Nike swooshes on her race kit or shoes this season. The team's obviously got different sponsors. And finally, we learnt that one men's team has been head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to wins and UCI points so far in 2024. That squad is UAE Team Emirates, who picked up 5 wins in the past 3 days to put their season tally on 30 wins already this season. 4 of those wins came in the Vuelta a Asturias, in which they won all 3 stages and the general classification. The first of those stages and the overall classification went to young Isaac Del Toro, who was also instrumental in the wins of his teammates Rafael Majka and Finn Fisher-Black on stages 2 and 3 respectively. Del Toro never finished worse than 3rd on any stage, and he also won the youth and points classification on top of the general classification. Now, UAE's 30 wins puts them 12 ahead of Visma Lease Bike, 14 ahead of Lidl-Trek, and 16 ahead of Soudal Quickstep. It also puts them 8 wins ahead of where they were at this same time last year, and more than halfway towards their 2023 total tally of 57 wins. Now, one team that has already surpassed their tally from last year is Decathlon-EasyPost. With 2 World Tour level wins from Dorian Godon at the Tour of Romandy last week, they now sit on 12 wins in 2024. So that's 2 more than they got in the entirety of 2023. And you have to go back to 2019 to find a season in which they had more wins, 14 that year, and then all the way back to 1999 to find a year in which they won more races by this point in the season. Now, we're being told that a lot of their success this year is down to their new Van Rysel bikes, but I think there's got to be quite a lot more to it than that. There's got to be a lot to be said about confidence, morale and momentum. Anyway, their 12 wins puts them 5th in the league table of men's World Tour squads in 2024. But at the bottom of the table, well, it's another French team who've got, well, they've got precisely 0 so far. It's been a tough start to the season for Cofidis, especially when you consider that they'd won 10 races by this time last year, before then winning 2 stages of the Tour de France and 1 at the Vuelta a España. Now, from what I can see, this has been the worst start to a season that they have ever had, and they've been in existence as a team now for 28 years. Even in 2020, when they only won 2 races in the whole season, those 2 wins came before April. Now, the problem that they have is that morale, confidence and momentum is in complete contrast to Decathlon-EasyPost. I think a win is obviously all they need to change all of that, but at the same time, it's quite hard to see where that win might come from right at this place in time. Now, that shift has just happened, I would say, for the Ineos Grenadiers. They had a couple of wins at the very start of the season, but both of them came in quite small races, I'd say. Jonathan Narvaez won the Ecuadorian National Championships, whilst Josh Tarling won the opening stage of Au Gran Camino. That said, that opening stage, GC times were neutralised due to the weather, so not everybody raced flat out. After that, they didn't win anything for 6 weeks, but the tide has now started to turn. Carlos Rodriguez got the ball rolling with a stage win in the Basque Country in April. Tom Pidcock obviously then won Amstel Gold. Tobias Foss a stage of the Tour of the Alps one day after that. And then Rodriguez won the GC at Romandy yesterday. Believe it or not, that was their first World Tour level stage race win since Ethan Hayter won the Tour of Poland almost 2 years ago. So I would say that they have still underperformed so far in 2024 based on wins to budget ratio, but they are now heading in the right direction at least. Other teams currently struggling are Movistar and Bahrain Victorious, who've both won 4 races so far this year. Movistar actually started really strongly with those 4 wins all ticked off by the 12th of February, but that means they've now not won anything for 2.5 months. EF Education-EasyPost are another team that I would say has overperformed versus budget this year. Richard Carapaz's victory in Romandy on Saturday was the 11th win of their season so far, and that puts them 1 ahead of Alpecin-Deceuninck, who have so far taken 10. However, it is the quality of the Belgian squad's wins this year that we should give special mention to. They obviously became the first team ever to win Milano-San Remo, the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix in a single season, and 8 of their 10 wins so far this year have been at World Tour level. That is very impressive. And that is also reflected in the UCI team rankings by points. The all-important UCI team rankings, of course, as there's going to be another round of promotions and demotions at the end of next year, so the end of 2025. That's done on cumulative points over a 3-season period. But if we look at this year's points, UAE are a long way ahead of everybody else. They have racked up close to 13,000 UCI points already this year. In second place are Alpecin-Deceuninck, albeit on just under 7,000 points. Lidl-Trek are just behind them in third place, whilst Decathlon AG2R managed to leapfrog Visma Lease Bike into fourth quite recently. Now obviously Visma Lease Bike have had their fair share of injuries, especially with their top riders in the last couple of months, and since it's a team's top 20 ranked riders that count towards their overall classification, that has really hobbled them. It is pretty close though between 2nd and 5th on those teams. The best non-World Tour team currently is Lotto Destiny. Their 4,500 points has them in 9th this season and ahead of the likes of BORA, Jayco and EF. Israel Premier Tech are not far behind them in 12th though, meaning that Team Cofidis and Team Astana are both outside of the top 18 currently. However, what we have to look at for the relegation battle is cumulative points since the start of 2023. Bearing in mind, we are currently less than halfway through this cycle, so it can all change. But were it to stop right here, right now, Israel Premier Tech and Lotto Destiny would both move into the World Tour, whilst Arkea B&B Hotels and Astana would be demoted to the 2nd division. They would still get automatic invites to all the World Tour races though, presuming they're the best ranked of those 2nd division teams. Sitting precariously in 18th position are Team dsm-firmenich post-NL, but they do currently have close to a 1,000 point buffer over Arkea B&B Hotels. Astana are a further 2,000 points behind them, so it's not looking too good for the Kazakh team as things stand. Team Cofidis, despite their lacklustre start to 2024, are in 17th, around 300 points ahead of Team DSM. On the women's side, it is SD Works who are leading in terms of races won this year, but the chasm is nowhere near as big as it was this time last year. So they currently have 14 wins to their name versus Lidl-Trek's 10, whilst FDJ Suez and Movistar both have 5 wins each. Phoenix-Deceuninck are the only World Tour women's team yet to get themselves off the mark with a win, although what we've got to remember with them is that they're a team made up entirely of cyclocross specialists. EF Education Canada, well, they've got 8 wins so far in 2024, but they don't have World Tour status this season. In terms of rankings and relegations, well, the women's was already decided at the end of last season, at the end of 2023, so we only need to look at points racked up so far this year to see where everybody stands. The end of this current cycle for the women's teams is going to come after 2 years though, so at the end of 2025, and that is in order to bring things in line with the men's. So, in terms of those UCI team rankings, SD Works Pro Time is also at the top, but Lidl-Trek are very close to them on this front. In fact, their win on the opening stage of La Vuelta yesterday, I think might even have turned the tables on them on SD Works. Those 2 teams, though, have almost twice as many UCI points as the 3rd best team so far this year, they being Canyon SRAM. Interestingly, although they're yet to take a win so far in 2024, Phoenix-Deceuninck have racked up enough points to sit 8th on the team rankings so far. That's the UCI ones, of course. The best of the non-World Tour teams at the moment is EF Education Canada, who sits in 14th spot, which means that the one World Tour team that would face demotion, if relegation were to happen right here, right now, would be Sirotti at WNT. They're quite a way behind Uno X in 15th spot. Remember, there are currently 15 spots in the Women's World Tour, so that's what they're fighting for there. Right, on to some actual racing now, and I'll start with a brief resume of the Tour de Romandie. I'm not going to dwell on it too long on this week's show because we don't have rights to use footage on this one, so you're going to get bored of watching me and looking at pictures. As mentioned earlier though, Carlos Rodriguez of Ineos Grenadiers gave them their biggest stage race win in quite some time. And it was a real team effort in Switzerland there. Egan Bernal, who continues his ascendancy back to the top level of the sport, was pivotal in the success of Rodriguez and the team. But to be honest, all of them played their part. Believe it or not, that was the first professional GC win for Rodriguez himself as well. Decathlon-EasyPost once again on fire at the race. They had a 1-2 on stage one with Godon and Vendrame, and Godon repeated with a second win on the final stage yesterday. Thibaut Naes of Lidl-Trek took his maiden World Tour win on stage 2. He and Vendrame were in the two survivors of an early breakaway that was only caught by one person, that person being Luke Plapp of Jayco Alula, who they both outsprinted at the finish. Pretty blooming good, isn't he, Thibaut Naes? That was his first road race of the season, incidentally. Brandon McNulty of UAE Team Emirates took the individual time trial, helped in part by an early start that day and then some changing weather conditions, whilst Richard Carapaz of EF Education-EasyPost won the Queen stage on Sunday, so yesterday. Michael Zeilard was victorious on the opening day's prologue, which is very short and twisty, and that was by far the biggest win of his career so far. Standout performance of the week though, for me at least, was from 23-year-old Florian Lipovic of BORA-hansgrohe. So he finished a close second to Carapaz on that Queen stage and actually looked like the strongest guy in the race that day. So Lipovic is an ex-biathlete who turned pro at the start of last year with BORA-hansgrohe. He did have some consistent results in lower level stage races in his first year as a pro, but this was a real breakthrough moment for him. He is incidentally on the provisional start list for the Giro d'Italia, which starts this Saturday, so it's going to be very interesting to see how he fares there if he does indeed do it. Talking of the Giro d'Italia, it is now just days away, of course. This coming Wednesday, we're going to have our big GCN preview out for you with a detailed look at all 21 of the stages, as well as a breakdown of the riders and teams taking part. Now, you may also have noticed I am sporting a brand new t-shirt today, and this is one part of really quite a big collection to celebrate the first men's Grand Tour of the season. You can find that complete collection over at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. Also, make sure you keep your eyes on our website where we'll have a big build up to the race over the course of this week. Patrick Fletcher has already written a preview. Another article that's already gone up is from Killian Kelly. 8 records that Pogacar could go for at this year's race so it doesn't get boring. I don't like to blow smoke up his backside, but it was actually mildly funny at points. Anyway, back to the racing and on to La Vuelta a España Femenina by Carrefour. So the 8-day race kicked off yesterday with a team time trial where it almost went horribly wrong for Lidl-Trek. Ellen van Dijk lost her front wheel on the final right-hand bend and took out Eleanor Bagstedt with her. Now, it took a while for the remainder of the team to sort of collect themselves and regather and ready for a sprint towards the line, but they did so just in the nick of time. Their margin of victory in the end over Visma Lease bike was just 2/100th of a second, with SD Works just a second behind that in third spot on the day. And with the top 7 teams only separated by 7 seconds though, it means that all is still to play for most of the hitters in the race. Sticking with the women's racing, there was actually a 1-2-3-4 for Team UAE ADQ at the Grand Prix Liberazione last week. Consoni, Persico and Gasparini were all out front on their own, whilst Venturelli won the 2-up sprint for 4th place on the day. On to Turkey now, where there were a lot of first pro wins. I've already mentioned the 3-stage wins for Tobias Lund Andersen, but before he'd even got himself off the mark, Max Kanter had already taken his first ever pro win for Astana, Kazakhstan on stage 2. Fabio Jakobsen had won the opening day, his first win since joining Team DSM at the start of this year, and that team actually came away from the race with 5 stage wins from the 7 stages that took place, plus the general classification. That GC was effectively decided on stage 6 to Manisa. 3 rides were locked together at the top of that final climb, and it was Frank Vandenbroek who was the quickest to get to it. He got the better of Morai Kudus, now riding for Terengganu cycling team, with Paul Double of Polti Kometa taking 3rd spot on that particular stage. And incidentally, that was how the general classification ended too. The last stage was annulled due to rain, whilst the only other stage that I have yet to mention was won by Giovanni Lonardi, after Danny Van Poppel was effectively relegated for swerving off his line in the sprint towards the line. However, That one was a little bit contentious because there was a corner in the final few hundred metres, which made it quite hard to actually stick to any kind of line because there wasn't a straight one to the line. Finally, at the festival Elsie Jacobs, Marta Lack was very successful. She took back-to-back wins in what is now 2 one-day races as opposed to the stage race that it was previously. Unfortunately for her team, Sirotti WNT, the race was also demoted to a .2 status, so it wasn't the big haul of points they'd have liked. Still, 80 points in the bags is better than nothing. Right, just before I finish for this week, a reminder to subscribe to GCN Racing to keep up with all the latest news on professional cycling. You should find a button on your screen to do exactly that right now. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up by clicking on the icon down below. That's all from me for now though. I'll see you tomorrow for the GCN show and on Wednesday for the big Giro preview. Goodbye for now.